Welcome to the Ask Why podcast, a series of conversations exploring the future of learning and the future of work with experts ranging from professional educators to investors, company builders, and individual learners. The way we learn and the way we work is changing rapidly. Artificial intelligence is automating ever more tasks around us, putting pressure on all of us to reskill and upskill at accelerated rates, while dealing with a level of unprecedented information overload. The education system, built for an age of information scarcity and around a broadcast model of teachers and learners, is simply no longer fit for purpose. But what can be put in its place? If this is a topic you're interested in, I invite you to subscribe to our podcast by searching for #AskWhy in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on YouTube or TikTok and catch the video feed of these conversations, which are happening in VR. I'm your host, Joshua Wohle, CEO at Mindstone, a platform that helps people become better learners. Today's guest is no other than Andy Bird. Andy has an amazing track record, having spent almost 10 years at Warner Media before going on to spend 14 as president and chairman of Walt Disney International. Today, he's the CEO at Pearson, trying to add more life to a lifetime of learning. This was one of my all-time favorite conversations, as Andy's vision of the future of learning touches on many of the same aspects we believe at Mindstone. And it's exciting to see a company as important as Pearson trying to take a stab at making that a reality. A quick disclaimer before we start: Pearson Ventures is a small investor in Mindstone.
Yes, well, hi, I'm Andy Bird. I'm the CEO of Pearson, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I have been CEO for the last 2.5 years. Prior to that, I spent close to 30 years in media and entertainment. I actually fell in love with radio when I was 17 years old and have worked for companies such as Virgin Broadcasting. I spent a decade at Turner Broadcasting with Cartoon Network, and then more recently, 15 years with the Walt Disney Company.
Yes. So I actually, as I was reading up on your profile, I realized we had more overlap as well, because obviously I was at Super Awesome before, and we had a lot of dealings with Disney at the time. So I wonder.
That's right.
I wonder if you heard about some of that stuff at the time as well.
Yes.
Thank you very much for being here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Been looking forward to it for a while. There is one question that I ask everyone at the start of the interview, which is, what is one thing you believe to be true that most people in your industry would disagree with?
Well, I don't know. It's a very, very good question. I think our industry, the industry, firstly, maybe would be how we define the industry, because many people certainly think about Pearson, they think about textbooks, they think about institutional learning.
Yeah.
And I see the world of learning as being very much lifelong learning. And it's what makes us as human race so amazing in a way. It's our curiosity, our desire to learn from the moment we're born throughout our entire life. And we have sort of compartmentalized it into a rigorous schooling, preschool, K through 12, and then you have this journey into college, into university before you go out into the workforce. And I think that is being dramatically disrupted. And my definition of higher education, for example, is everything from 16 onwards. And I think, you're going to see this blurring of institutional and what I call enterprise learning. What you learn whilst you're in a job, but your learning doesn't start at school. It certainly doesn't end at college or wherever. I don't know how controversial that is, but that's something I truly believe in.
Yeah. So I think the start of that is indeed less understood. The fact that just the industry is no longer, like, higher ed is no longer just university. It is everything after high school, basically.
Yes.
And it is crazy how fast it's evolving. This is more and more the case, especially now, right? I mean, we'll touch on AI a little bit afterwards,
Yes.
but everything we thought in terms of reskilling and upskilling that was already high pressure, if anything, has just dramatically accelerated over the next few years with everything that's happened, right? So the need for people to continue to learn in order to find themselves a place in the workforce is
Yes.
definitely something that's highly there.
It's
Yeah.
it's one of the things that attracted me to the company. You know,
Yeah.
when I left Disney, I was certain after such a wonderful company, you can't top working for the Walt Disney Company in media and entertainment. I didn't want to work in another media and entertainment company. And this was back in 2018. And I thought, well, I'm very interested in creating impact and purpose. And I thought the two fields or sectors that were ripe for disruption were healthcare and education. And this was back in 2018 because I thought, you know, when you go into a doctor's office or anything, it's very much like it was decades ago. Similarly, you walk into a university and it is, some could argue, like it was decades ago. And lo and behold, you know, then as we've seen in the media and entertainment sector, particularly, I thought technology could play a huge role in disrupting the educational space. And then we had the tragedy of the pandemic, and that impacted positively and a lot negatively outside of the human pain and suffering, you know, within, you know, Zoom schools. You know, the world had to adapt.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ways that it adapted wasn't fantastic at the time. But what the pandemic acted as in many ways was an accelerant to change.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, what excites me is we're just on the start of a totally disruptive journey in terms of, as I said earlier, how we define education, how we define learning, and how we use these amazing tools and resources and technology to
Yeah.
to redefine the experience.
Yeah. It's very interesting because I, when we started Mindstone, I literally had the exact same question after having sold Super Awesome to Epic. It was healthcare or education,
Huh,
which one of these two from an impact perspective?
funny. Yes.
And yeah, I decided to go with education for two reasons. One is because I thought that if I went down to the healthcare route, I probably needed 5 years of upskilling myself before I could be useful.
Yes.
And then second, I thought that education was further behind from a technology perspective. And as an engineer by background, I thought I could be more useful in that environment than in healthcare, which was at least a little bit ahead still compared to education from a technology perspective. So
Yes.
those are
Yes.
the two reasons for me as well. So very interesting. We ended up
Huh.
with the same question. Okay, so one of the questions today, by the way, will have been written by ChatGPT.
Oh, great.
And at
Great.
the end of the interview, I will ask you if you have any idea which one of the questions might have been ChatGPT.
Okay. Perfect.
So I read on LinkedIn the post that you wrote about why we all need more life in a lifetime of learning, and you talk very specifically about how learning shouldn't be a chore, and that it's something I've also found when talking to people. So lots of people talk about learning as a negative experience. I actually had a very, as we were building Mindstone, often you talk about people that when do you learn? And they will answer, well, I don't have time for that.
Yes.
You then talk about what do they do in their daily job, and you realize that if they're in a knowledge-intensive industry, like they might very well have been learning for 2 or 3 hours every day, but they call it
Yes.
productivity.
Yes.
And it's like there's this interesting duality, and I guess I wanted to ask you, what do you think needs to happen for people to start to engage differently with the concept of learning and get back to a positive attitude
Yes.
towards it?
I think it's right. And it's back to my earlier comment around, you know,
Mm,
from the moment we're born to the moment we pass, we're always learning. And, you know, some of that is active learning and a lot of it is maybe passive learning.
mhm,
And this notion, and it's back to the people equate learning and education with formality and structure. And I think there's an ability to totally disrupt, and you're doing that with the what you're doing at Mindstone, for example. Our chief marketing officer is a wonderful woman, actually came from the media and entertainment world as well. And the analogy that she uses, which I think is really apt, is the world of exercise and sport. We have, as a race, exercised, go back to, Greeks' time and the Olympics, or, we've always run to hunt, for example. And then, even more recently, you would go to the gym, or you would play a game of soccer, or you would go for a run or a swim or something. And then probably in sort of the late 80s, 90s, came this notion of turning exercise into fitness, and fitness as a lifestyle. And so you fast forward to today, and it's the terminology, the language, the technology around, have you done your 10,000 steps, for example? And if we can, I think it's a really interesting analogy where keeping fit, going for a run or going for a walk or swim or whatever, is still hard in many ways. It takes effort, but now you have the technology to reward you, and where you can show, look, on my Apple Watch or whatever, I've done my 10,000 steps or whatever my goals are. If we
It's a fast feedback loop, yeah.
Exactly. If we can take that and apply it to the world of learning, and in many ways that's what one of your goals is, it helps individuals transcend over from learning's hard, I don't have time, to a sort of an enlightenment of, oh my gosh, I've got literally a world of opportunity to learn.
Yeah. It is so funny. There are two ways that I often talk about what we are trying to do with Mindstone from a marketing perspective. And one is, I say we have to do for learning what Headspace did for mindfulness.
Yes.
But another one that I use a lot is we need to do for learning what Nike did for fitness.
Brilliant. Exactly.
It's from a marketing perspective, the attitude to fitness, exactly to your point, changed over a period of 20, 30 years. Hopefully it's not going to take 20, 30 years, because we need it to be much faster. But the attitude shift is absolutely something that that needs to happen. Yeah. So interesting that you're talking about it in the same words. Yeah. What ways are you trying to get employers part of this conversation with Pearson?
Well, we have a lot of, our enterprise business. Most people think of Pearson around, as I mentioned, higher education, college textbooks, etc. Probably our most significant business is actually certifications, and we could talk about the future of that, and enterprise. We have over 1,500 enterprise clients across our portfolio of products. And I believe that it's where the biggest opportunity is going to lie in terms of, I think that learning benefit, if we call it that, is going to become as important to an employee as health benefits are and pension benefits are. An employee is going to look at a company and expect to, as you do now, to have health benefits, but they're also going to say, well, what are you going to do for me? How am I going to learn it? If I can't learn and improve myself whilst in your employment, I'll go and seek pastures new.
Yeah, I see. Because as learning is more and more important, and the half-life of skills is diminishing, if I'm not learning whilst I'm with you, my value in the workforce is diminishing, which means it's a one-way. Yeah.
And then from an employer, I mean, back in, not too long ago, if you were, two things I think are true. Firstly, all industries have been transformed in one way or the other. I can't think of a sector where it's like, well, that's not going to change. I think all sectors are undergoing dramatic change to varying degrees.
Maybe luxury.
Maybe luxury. Yeah, that's a good shout out. But certainly luxury fashion is, fashion, and the way you sell fashion, the way you experience luxury, maybe one could argue is changing. Yeah, let's take, I don't know, the retail banking sector, for example. In the old world, a retail bank needs to move from branches to digital. They would fire all of the people, make them redundant in make all the people redundant who work in the branches, and then have to go out and source people with new skills. And
Yeah.
that means that the employer loses productivity. Now, and this is something that we do, and it's a fast growing part of our business, is we have a company called Fathom, which has the largest skills oncology. We use AI a lot to be able to diagnose the skills of some of those employees who work in, or the attributes of some of those employees who say work in the retail bank, and say we should reskill them. We should take Joshua, who's earning $20 an hour, reskill him into a cybersecurity expert, and it's good for us, the bank, and it's good for Joshua. We maintain productivity. So I think that way of thinking, I think the more enlightened employers are starting to see that, but I think there's a lot more we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Totally agree. So you mentioned at some point that we no longer buy CDs, we listen to Spotify, we no longer buy DVDs, we watch Netflix. And so um, how we learn is changing, driven by technology. And how do you
Yes.
think these two are linked? So I guess especially diving into those two parallels, right? How media consumption has changed and how you're thinking about what the consequence or what this might say on how we think about learning in the future.
Yes, well, either music or media, I think went through this disruption at an earlier stage. And
Yeah.
I think there's two relevant impacts. Firstly, E3 sort of came along and allowed consumers the opportunity to choose the music that they wanted to listen to and not be forced to buy the whole bundle.
Yeah.
And that totally disrupted the whole financial model of record companies at the time. And it was interesting, they called themselves record companies. They were in the record business. They didn't think about themselves as being in the music business. Maybe there's a parallel there between education and learning. Are you in the
Mm.
education business? Then you
The
can draw a
textbook
parameter
business.
around that. Or are you in the learning business?
Education.
And so, I think there are many parallels from the textbook into the e-text, and now you can create playlists rather than tables of content. Your learning can come in the form of virtual reality, video, audio, animation, graphics.
Mm.
It can be more modular. You can start to customize it. I think the role of AI in this is really, really interesting in terms of what you can do. And most importantly, you no longer become anonymous. So Spotify knows exactly what music I like. And the more I
Yeah.
listen through Spotify, the better it is at delivering music to me. The same with Netflix in the world of media, of film and TV. And the same then can happen in the world of learning. When we would sell a textbook through a bookstore to a student, we had no idea who the student was. Everyone was anonymous. All we had was, well, we sold 20 million textbooks this year.
Yeah.
Who bought them? Haven't got a clue. A year and a half ago, we launched Pearson Plus, which is an affordable way, but also has a lot more functionality around how you can use your e-text. And of course, and then immediately we get to know, oh, it's Joshua.
Yeah.
Joshua's the one. And guess what? Joshua's studying physics or microbiology or finance or whatever. As soon as we know that, we're in the position to help Joshua. So Joshua goes from being an anonymous statistic to being an individual. And if we can then help Joshua for the next 20 years of his life as he goes through college into the workforce, that then becomes a very powerful proposition for
Yeah.
ourselves.
And so if you if you look at this from a visual media perspective, right? So the one with the everything that happened through Netflix and Disney Plus and all the different
Yes.
things, but also with the big up and coming, well, the YouTubes of the world, the TikToks of the world, the
Yes.
Instagrams, right? How do you think about the value of content within the learning space, as you try to figure out these different pieces, right, from the highly productionized pieces to the pieces that might be freely available for anyone to access, like how do you think about the puzzle there?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think ultimately, and certainly our strategy is focus on quality.
Mhm.
You know, focus on quality and trust and the quality of our IP. I believe you would expect me to say this, spending all my so much time at Disney. You know, I understand the value of IP.
Yeah.
And having high quality IP is so important as a differentiator. There is a lot of really great IP on YouTube, for example.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of rubbish. And
Yes.
how you navigate your way to find the good from the bad, the real from the fake, or whatever it happens to be, is a challenge. And I think, you know, companies such as ourselves can really help students, learners, navigate their way through those by providing, you know, highly curated, high quality content that you trust. You know, we recently on Pearson Plus that I mentioned launched a series of channels. So you go to Pearson Plus in version 1 because you're studying a Pearson textbook in biology, let's say, Campbell's biology. In September last year, we launched this channels concept, which is a series of videos that follow the biology curriculum. So regardless of what textbook you may be studying, if you have an interest in biology, we can help you. Because back to one of your earlier questions, a lot of people lack the confidence to learn. We see this in the certification area. It's a bit like back to exercise. Oh, I could never do that. Well, if you're given a training program and you start in a progressive manner, you can end up running that marathon. But you're not going to go from zero to running the marathon in a day. So, you know, if you have a trusted partner who coaches you, I know it's very, you know, familiar in terms of what you're trying to build here, what you
Yeah.
are building. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. It's interesting. Part of the thesis that I would have is that today anything you want to learn online, you probably can, if
Yes.
you know where to start, if you can motivate yourself, if you are at ease with technology. And so I guess we're addressing this problem by trying to remove those ifs through a learning coach. But another way of addressing that problem is to curate some of the content to remove some of those barriers at the same
Yeah,
time.
or
So
you
I
bring
guess
the
it's a
two things together.
yeah.
Because I think, you know, I know, you know, there's a lot around, you know, GPT-4, OpenAI, the good and the bad of AI generally, LLMs.
Yeah.
You know, as we were discussing earlier, they have the good, they've ingested, what's it, 15 trillion inputs or something into
It's
GPT-4.
totally crazy. Yeah.
Totally crazy,
Yeah.
mind blowing. But, you know, and lots of really great stuff,
Yeah.
but it also lots and lots of rubbish.
Yeah.
Now, I think there is certainly for a company such as ourselves, you know, that has a pedigree. We have over 5,000 distinguished authors who create trusted, high quality material content. And
Yeah.
it's not just the words, it's
Mhm.
also the structure. You know, if you want
Yeah.
to think of the syntax, that's what we're really good about. We don't just, you know, there is a difference between Andy Bird's biology book and Campbell's biology from Pearce. You know,
Yeah.
I would recommend everyone reads Campbell's biology rather than Andy Bird's biology because it's just proven to be so much more effective.
Yeah.
So there is, you know, a purity of data input that we can provide that's going to increase the purity of output as we
And
move into this new world.
and so I wonder, and let me know if we're going, if you prefer to move on to another topic. But there's a massive aspect in education, in learning, which is about the prior context you bring to the table, right? If you and I have the same level of physics, we have entirely different backgrounds. the content that works for me is different from the content that works for you, because our brains will engage with the information in different ways.
Yes.
So I guess compared to entertainment, which I would say at least up to now has been a world that has been more mass market, right? Which is it's not the perfect video or the perfect movie for the perfect person, but it's more the quality of the movie draws masses. I wonder if that parallel holds within learning because of the inherent personal nature of it. And so if a strategy of a lot of content ends up one day through personalization not winning out over a strategy of very high quality content, but the same for everyone. How do you think about that balance between those two?
I think that the answer lies somewhere between those two axes.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
think the answer's somewhere, whether not quite in the middle, but it's somewhere between those
Somewhere in
two
that.
two axes. Because you see in you know, if you were to look at my Netflix home screen,
Yeah.
it would be different than yours. And so there's a
Yeah.
degree of whether that's,
True.
and it's around genres, it's around past habit. So I think there are some parallels there, that we can draw on. But what's interesting with learning is, you know, maybe I was with someone yesterday and said, maybe I want to take a bit of geology with a bit of biology, with a bit of history, and I want to create my own playlist of learning from these. I'm just picking 3 random sources
Yeah.
because it, you know, it answers a particular curiosity or question that I have. It's not that I want to be pure. You know, this notion of pure vertical learning, I think, aside from certain core subjects like, you know, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer, where clearly you need to be expert in a particular field and then an expert in a subfield. You know, I think in the future, in the not too distant future, you know, you'll go to college and you'll have a grounding in an educational certificate, a
Yeah.
subject, let's call it. But, you know, I think the more enlightened universities are going to have to offer a load of life skills. So
It's
you actually will graduate saying, here's my portfolio. Here's my portfolio. I sort of majored in a way in physics, but I've got certification in understanding of AI or marketing or whatever it happens to be. Therefore, it's uniquely me, and it makes me more marketable as I go into the world of employment.
yeah. We had a previous guest on the Fireside Chats, Ed Fedot from the London Interdisciplinary School,
Oh, cool.
which is the first university in the UK to do a disciplineless university. So there are no disciplines. It is problem-focused university where they look at one problem every semester and they attack it from all angles. So COVID from an economics perspective, from a biology
Oh, that's
perspective,
great. Yes.
and kind of the entire curriculum is built around problems, not around disciplines.
That's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have 2 sons, and they both went to NYU, and they
Mhm.
went to a wonderful school there called Gallatin.
Mhm.
And you basically build your own degree,
Mhm. Interesting.
and so you have access to courses pretty much across the whole of NYU.
Mhm.
And if you have interests in marketing, or, you know, my youngest wanted to learn to play the piano, so went to the Clive Davis School of Music and did a semester of learning to play the piano as
Yeah.
part of building his portfolio. And I think that is actually, it's more relevant to the outside world.
Yeah.
You
What you
know,
choose to
he
engage with.
wants to work in the music industry. He wanted to understand programming, so he did some computer courses. He was doing some marketing courses. He learned to play the piano,
Yeah.
et cetera, so he could program, et cetera. That is going to be more relevant to him than saying, I went to University X and I got a degree in Y. It
Yeah.
doesn't actually tell me as an employer, well, what are you actually good at?
Yeah.
I think that's a really
Yeah.
interesting opportunity.
Totally agree. And so I have to ask you about AI, obviously.
Yes.
um, High level, what do you think are the biggest impacts? I guess let's go past the obvious ones, right? Everyone knows it's going to be used somehow for personalization and things like. What do you think are maybe some of the second order impacts of AI as you try to think about the future of learning? Like, how are you thinking about this on a kind of 5-year horizon, 10-year horizon for Pearson?
Well, I think and I think this is why I'm so intrigued and why I was so happy to have invested in your venture.
Mhm.
Ultimately, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, I think firstly, the world will be driven by voice.
Yeah.
This notion that, I come from the world of typewriters and postal service, where, my first job, I typed a letter. There was so many friction points. I had to post it. It was opened, read by a secretary who then passed it to the station manager. He read it. He dictated a reply. She typed it back. It was sent. The whole process took like 2 weeks. Now we think about it, and you apply that to sort of Google search, and I think we'll be looking, going, did we really used to type words into a box, and then
And then
we
look
would
through
get
results.
answers? We'd get answers that weren't necessarily. The relevancy was largely dictated by how much someone paid to serve up that answer. What were we thinking? What were we thinking? So I think, the use of audio, I think ultimately we'll all have some form of personal coach, life
Mhm.
coach,
Yeah.
that will be integrated into, whether it's a combination of virtual, augmented, watch, phone, whatever it happens, it'll be sort of augmented into your life, that it's like the next generation of Hey Siri
Yeah.
or Alexa or whatever.
Mm.
But I have an Alexa. Did you
You
hear
have an
that?
Alexa behind you. Yeah. Sorry, I have one
Yeah.
too.
Always listening.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, yeah, I totally agree. It's a very, very interesting bit, especially in terms of the displacement with Google and everything. Like it's interesting how divisive that is. Lots of people still think that AI doesn't work for search. It has replaced my search default. My default now is if I have a question, I ask ChatGPT first,
Yes.
and 9 times out of 10 it answers. And then sometimes when I have a more research intensive query, then I will go to Google when I need to look at
Yes.
5, 6, 7 different sources for things.
Yes.
Now, going slightly different topic, what do you think about virtual reality and augmented reality? Like, how do you think about? I mean, this is now weirdly enough, AI is taking the spotlight for everything right now because we're right in the middle of it. But AR and VR have big potential for learning. Like, how do you think about that in the slightly longer, well, medium to long term, I guess?
Yeah, I actually think the future opportunity is probably more in the AR than the VR space. Although, I mean, there are some excellent ventures in the world, and learning is a fantastic application. Education is a fantastic. This could be a virtual classroom.
Yeah.
For example, we are together. I know we could go
Mhm.
up to the whiteboard together, wherever it is, right behind us,
Right.
and behind me anyway,
Yeah.
and collaborate.
Mhm.
Um, this ability I've seen, the companies do this, where with a snap of fingers, we could both now be in Colosseum in Rome, and
Yes.
be experiencing that, and the ability to bring those experiences to students who will never have the opportunity to do that in real life, I think is
Wow.
very powerful. um, it's used already, and we're involved in some aspects of it in terms of in the world of medicine and
Yeah.
learning, in terms of being able to use a digital cadaver rather than a real life
Body.
example. Yeah,
Yeah.
body. Not quite real life, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Um, uh, and so I think that it's there. I think, everyone maybe got overexcited and by the potential of it generally. It was
Mm.
certainly hyped up, I think, as Meta invested so much into it.
Well, they still are,
Um,
I think. But
and they still are, yes. Um, I think it will evolve as
Mhm.
everything. We will look back, and certainly the Oculus set that I'm wearing will be the equivalent of the Motorola brick
What do you mean?
phone.
Yeah.
You know, if you remember those first digital brick phones, maybe
I
you see,
do.
you're probably too young for that. Yeah.
I remember
Um,
it, but I
yeah.
wasn't alive when it was popular.
Yes. Um, and you know, whether it will be, and I think that's where it'll be some form of augmented reality
Yeah.
will probably
Mm.
work more. And then maybe there's a, you know, you switch and you can go into pure virtual reality for something,
Yeah,
then
so you get
switch it back. Yeah.
default AR
Yeah.
with an option to go into VR. Yeah,
Yeah.
could make
Yeah.
sense.
By the way, was that the Chat GPT question?
It was not.
Ah,
So this was actually one of the things. So when we got acquired by Epic with Super Awesome, that was actually one of the things that I was initially interested in looking at, because I think they, like, some of the gaming platforms have a really interesting
yes.
opportunity because they have built out some of these games that have been built are built in historical periods. So the exact
Yes.
example that you gave, like, these worlds exist. So if you could take them, if they're built on a game engine, you could take them and just transpose people in them, right? And you are right in
Yes.
the middle of the Colosseum and have a history
Yes.
class right there. That
Yes.
was something I was really excited by. Never actually saw the light of day in the way that I wanted at the time, but it was I
Huh.
still think the opportunity is there for game
Yeah.
engines like that. Both Epic and Unity, I guess, have the possibility of doing something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Getting to the end, what are you most excited about for the future of learning for Pearson very specifically? What's the one
I,
thing you cannot wait for the world to see? I don't know how much of this you can actually reveal. Obviously,
uh,
public company, whole thing, but anything that you're particularly excited by that you just want the world to see to bring the vision to life.
we are. Yeah, it's a great question. We are working on a number of initiatives around this notion of lifelong learning,
Mhm,
and this blend between institutional and enterprise learning,
mhm.
and I'm very excited. We've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes for maybe the last 18 months. It's a bit like assembling the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah,
And we're now in the process of putting those pieces together to create a picture. And I'm very excited for people to see what the picture is, but I can't really go into any more detail than that.
of course. Yeah. Well, maybe afterwards. Um, and so there we are. I have one more question before asking you about the GPT one. What is a question that you have right now that you wish you had an answer to?
Oh, I could go very profound, but I think,
Please do.
well, you know, the one question that really fascinates me, and it's based around the notion of people who know me are going to go, oh, no, not again. I think as humans, we have never really, our minds have never grasped the concept of infinity.
Mhm.
Of, you know, and I take pi as an example, and then I marry it to, I bore people silly by this notion: is the universe finite or infinite? Because I find
Mhm.
the potential answers to that
Right.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
both are concepts that you can't get your head around, right?
Totally, totally. So if someone could come along and go, hey, Andy, by the way, it's this and it's this. Yeah, because if it's finite, what's on the other side?
Yeah.
If it's
And if it's
infinite, the mind,
yes.
it blows the mind. So I think for some reason, we don't, maybe it's just me, but, you know, this concept of infinity, we don't really totally grasp.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that is a really good question to have an answer to. If you ever find the answer, please do let me know.
I will, I will.
And so if you had to guess which question was ChatGPT today, what do you think it was?
Oh, gosh. I'll go the second last question.
No, it was the one around the CDs, and so the
Oh,
comparison
really?
between the media industry and the learning
Oh,
industry. Yeah.
interesting.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Obviously, I fed it some of the content
Yes.
that you've written in the
Yes.
past, which is
Yes.
how it
Yes.
came up
How it came up with the
some of the
question. That
questions.
was
Yeah.
great.
I really enjoyed the conversation. How did it go?
Likewise.
No.
Really, really enjoyed it. And I'm very excited to see how, you know, your company progresses. I think it's super,
Looking forward to
super
it.
exciting. And I can't wait to see as you bring all of your pieces of the jigsaw puzzle
Yeah, we've got
together.
the same thing. It's in the next few months. You're often based in London, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
we're actually in your offices right now.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
cool.
Pedro set us up there.
Yeah, I'll pop in and come and say hi in IRL.
And there we go. Yeah, would
Yeah.
love to. And I can give you a demo once the thing
Perfect.
is all live.
Great. Well, thank you
Hey.
very much, Joshua.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Really enjoyed it. Talk soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
I'm your host, Joshua Wohle, CEO at Mindstone, and I hope today's conversation shed light on at least some of the problems we're facing. If you thought today's conversation was interesting, I invite you to subscribe to our podcast by searching for #AskWhy in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on YouTube or TikTok and catch the video feed of these conversations, which are happening in VR.